The last white wolf pup should never have survived the night. Half buried beneath a fallen pine tree, its tiny body disappeared beneath fresh snow while the mountain wind carried away the last weak sounds it could make. By sunrise, the forest would have hidden every trace of its existence, and with it, the final living bloodline of the White Guardians that had once watched over an entire kingdom. But fate had not finished writing its story. A poor village girl, carrying nothing more than a basket of firewood and a heart that could never ignore suffering, knelt beside the broken tree and gathered the trembling little creature into her arms. Far above the forest, hidden among the silent cliffs where even hunters feared to climb, another pair of eyes watched the rescue unfold. The Alpha King's greatest enemy did not reach for his bow. He did not order his soldiers forward. Instead, a slow smile crossed his face. Because he had just witnessed something the kingdom believed impossible. The last white wolf had chosen its guardian. And before long, kings would bleed for that choice. Beyond the Frostvale Mountains, where endless forests met snow-covered valleys and rivers carved silver paths through ancient stone, stood the Kingdom of Eldor. Travelers often called it the Kingdom of Pines because forests surrounded nearly every village, stretching so far that no one alive had ever reached their true end. Children grew up listening to stories carried by crackling fireplaces during long winters. Stories about the White Guardians. They were not ordinary wolves. Their coats shimmered beneath moonlight like untouched snow. Their golden eyes saw danger long before humans could sense it. Old songs claimed they had once walked beside the first kings, protecting not only the royal family but every river, forest, and mountain that gave life to the kingdom. As long as white wolves remained, the land remained balanced. The winters arrived gently. Harvests filled every barn. The forests welcomed hunters without anger. But one winter, many years before the children now playing in village streets had been born, the white wolves vanished. Some blamed disease. Others whispered about curses. The oldest elders lowered their voices even further. They were betrayed. No one ever explained by whom. After enough years passed, the stories slowly became legends. The legends became bedtime tales. Eventually, most people stopped believing white wolves had ever existed at all. Only the oldest stone carvings hidden inside forgotten temples still remembered their faces. Far from the royal capital rested a tiny woodland village named Ashbrook. It was little more than a handful of wooden cottages gathered around a small stream that never completely froze, even during the harshest winters. Smoke drifted lazily from stone chimneys. Children laughed while chasing one another through fresh snow. Old women hung herbs beneath roof beams. Woodcutters returned before sunset carrying heavy bundles across tired shoulders. Life there was simple. Nobody owned much. Still, people shared what little they had. At the very edge of the village stood the smallest cottage of them all. Its roof leaned slightly after surviving too many winters. The fence surrounding its tiny garden had been repaired so many times that almost every board came from a different tree. Beside the front door hung bunches of drying lavender, pine needles, and mountain herbs whose gentle fragrance greeted anyone who stepped close enough. It belonged to Mira. She had lived alone since losing both parents during a fever that swept through Ashbrook many winters earlier. The villagers had helped her survive. An elderly baker left warm bread outside her door whenever business had gone well. The village carpenter quietly repaired broken shutters each autumn. Children often waved whenever she walked by. But kindness could never erase loneliness. Every evening, only silence waited inside her little home. Yet somehow, bitterness never found a place to stay there. Each morning before dawn, Mira wrapped herself inside a patched wool cloak, picked up her worn basket, and disappeared into the forest before anyone else had finished breakfast. She gathered mushrooms after rain, wild berries during warmer seasons, healing herbs wherever they grew. Sometimes she sold them at the village market. Sometimes she simply gave them away to families who needed medicine more than she needed coins. People often asked why. She always answered the same way. If kindness waits until we're rich, it usually arrives too late. Old Mrs. Elson, who lived beside the village well, liked to laugh whenever she heard those words. That girl was born with too much heart. One freezing afternoon, while collecting fallen branches near the edge of the woods, Mira heard a frantic fluttering somewhere beyond the trees. She stopped walking. The sound came again. Small. Desperate. She carefully followed it through deep snow until she discovered a robin caught inside tangled thorn vines. Its tiny wings beat wildly. Bright feathers scattered across the frozen ground. "Oh!" Mira whispered softly. She slowly placed her basket aside. "There you are." Instead of pulling immediately, she spoke gently while carefully snapping each thorn one by one. The frightened bird gradually became still. Its rapid breathing slowed. Moments later, the final branch fell away. The robin remained perched upon her gloved hand for several quiet seconds. Its little head tilted curiously toward her. Then, with one cheerful flutter, it disappeared into the pale winter sky. Mira smiled. Watching animals return safely to the wild always filled the quiet corners of her heart that loneliness could never quite reach. She continued gathering wood until clouds darkened overhead. Snow began falling again. At first only a few flakes drifted lazily through the branches. Then the mountain wind arrived. Within minutes the peaceful forest transformed into a swirling sea of white. The trees groaned beneath powerful gusts. Snow raced across the ground so quickly it erased footprints almost as soon as they appeared. Mira pulled her cloak tighter. "I should head home." The storm answered with another fierce blast. She had walked this forest since childhood. Even she struggled to recognize familiar paths. Branches cracked somewhere ahead. A raven burst from the treetops, disappearing into the blizzard. Then, she heard it. So faint she almost believed it belonged to the wind. A tiny whimper. She stopped instantly. Silence. Again. A weak little cry drifted beneath the roar of the storm. Not a bird. Not a fox. Something else. Mira turned slowly. The sound came from deeper inside the forest where broken pines leaned heavily beneath fresh snow. She hesitated. The sensible choice would have been to leave. Darkness approached. The storm worsened every minute. No one would blame her. Yet those tiny cries continued. Each one weaker than the last. She sighed softly. "I can't leave you there." Turning away from the safe trail, Mira struggled toward the sound. Snow reached nearly to her knees. Cold wind cut through her clothes until every breath stung her chest. Several times she slipped against frozen roots hidden beneath white drifts. Still, she kept moving. Finally she reached a towering pine tree split cleanly in half by lightning long ago. One massive section had collapsed onto the forest floor. Fresh snow covered everything beneath it. The tiny cries had nearly vanished. Mira knelt immediately. Using gloved hands, she brushed away thick layers of snow. Nothing. She searched farther beneath the fallen trunk. Still nothing. Then, her fingers touched fur. Soft. Ice cold. She carefully cleared away another layer of snow. A tiny white wolf pup lay curled tightly against the frozen earth. Its eyes remained closed. Its breathing barely stirred the snow around its nose. One small paw had become trapped beneath heavy branches. Its beautiful white coat blended so perfectly with the surrounding snow that anyone walking a few steps away would have missed it entirely. "Oh, little one," Mira whispered. "What happened to you?" No answer came. Only another weak shiver. She carefully lifted the heavy branch trapping its leg. The pup didn't cry. It lacked the strength. She slipped both hands beneath its tiny body. It weighed almost nothing. Far too light. The little wolf felt colder than the snow itself. Without thinking, Mira wrapped it inside her own wool scarf before pulling it close against her chest beneath her cloak. Immediately she felt the faintest heartbeat. Slow. Fragile. Still fighting. "You're coming home with me." The wind roared louder as though arguing with her decision. The forest seemed strangely still. Almost. Watching. High above the trees, hidden among jagged cliffs overlooking the valley, a dark horse stood perfectly motionless. Its rider remained equally silent. Lord Varek lowered the hood covering his face. His sharp grey eyes never left the tiny figure struggling through the storm far below. Beside him stood 3 mounted soldiers dressed entirely in black. One quietly reached for his bow. "My lord." "We can take it now." Varric slowly raised one gloved hand. No. The soldier frowned. But the wolf. I said no. His voice remained calm. Cold. Certain. He continued watching Mira disappear between the snow-covered pines. So. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. One survived. The wind carried away his quiet words. For years he had searched every mountain, every ruined sanctuary, every forgotten cave, always arriving too late, always finding empty dens. Now, the last white wolf had revealed itself. Not to a king, not to a hunter, not to a warrior, to a poor orphan. His smile widened slightly. Interesting. He turned his horse away from the cliff. Do not touch the girl. His soldiers exchanged confused glances. My lord. Not yet. He looked once more toward the endless forest below. Sometimes destiny walks exactly where you need it to. The riders disappeared into the growing snowstorm, unaware that every moment the little white wolf remained alive. The future of the Kingdom of Eldor was quietly beginning to change. The storm raged long after Mira reached the edge of Ashbrook. Snow clung to her cloak until it looked as though she had walked through the clouds themselves. Her boots sank into deep drifts with every weary step, yet she never loosened her hold around the tiny bundle hidden beneath her coat. The faint heartbeat against her chest was still there. Weak, slow, but alive. That single, fragile rhythm carried her the rest of the way home. Her little cottage welcomed her with silence. Mira pushed open the wooden door, and a rush of warmth from the stone fireplace met the freezing air behind her. She quickly barred the door against the storm before kneeling beside the hearth. Fresh pine logs crackled as she fed the fire. Golden light slowly filled the room. Only then did she unwrap the wool scarf. The tiny white wolf lay perfectly still. Its fur was damp from melting snow, and one small paw hung at an unnatural angle where the fallen tree had trapped it. Oh! Her voice barely rose above a whisper. You've been alone for far too long. She warmed a clean cloth beside the fire before gently drying the pup's fur. Every movement was careful, patient, almost motherly. The little wolf did not resist. It lacked the strength. When she finished, she mixed crushed mountain herbs into warm goat's milk and carefully dipped her fingertip into the bowl. A single drop touched the pup's lips. Nothing. Another drop. Then another. Finally, its tiny tongue moved. Only once. But it was enough. Mira smiled with quiet relief. There you are. She wrapped the pup inside her softest blanket and placed it in a basket beside the fireplace, where the warmth could slowly reach its frozen body. The little creature slept through the entire night. Mira hardly did. Every few hours she woke to check its breathing. Sometimes she simply sat beside the basket, watching the flames dance across its snowy fur. She had rescued many injured animals before. Foxes, owls, broken-winged hawks. None had ever looked like this. Even asleep, the white wolf carried a strange dignity. Its fur almost shimmered beneath the firelight. Morning arrived quietly. The storm had passed. Fresh snow covered Ashbrook like a soft white blanket. Smoke rose peacefully from cottage chimneys. Children hurried outside, eager to build snow forts before the afternoon sun softened the drifts. Inside Mira's cottage, sunlight slipped through the frosted window. The tiny wolf stirred. Its nose twitched. One ear flicked. Then, slowly, two bright silver-blue eyes opened. For several silent moments, the pup simply looked around. It had never seen this place before. Its breathing quickened. Its small body trembled. Mira, who had been preparing fresh broth nearby, immediately knelt beside the basket. It's all right. She kept her hand still. She had learned long ago that frightened animals trusted patience more than movement. You don't have to be afraid. The pup watched her closely. Its ears flattened. It tried to stand. The injured paw buckled beneath its weight, and the tiny wolf slipped back into the blankets with a soft cry. Before Mira could reach it, the little creature surprised her. Instead of shrinking away, it slowly crawled toward her. Its nose quivered. Then it gently pressed against the palm of her hand. Mira held her breath. The tiny wolf closed its eyes. Its whole body relaxed. For the first time since she had found it beneath the fallen tree. It slept peacefully. Trust had arrived without force. It had simply chosen her. Days passed. The winter sky remained pale, but something unusual began happening around Ashbrook. The frozen stream beside the village started flowing again. Not quickly. Just enough for clear water to whisper beneath the ice. Old fishermen noticed first. Then the children. Even elder Rowan, who had lived through nearly 80 winters, stood quietly beside the river, shaking his head. "I've never seen this before." The changes did not stop there. Birds returned weeks earlier than they should have. Red squirrels ventured from their nests despite the lingering cold. A wounded doe, normally too frightened to approach people, appeared outside Mira's garden one morning before disappearing peacefully into the woods. The forest no longer felt asleep. It felt awake. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some called it a blessing. Others wondered if ancient spirits had returned. Mira paid little attention. Her world had become much smaller. It revolved around a single white wolf pup learning to walk again. Each morning she carefully cleaned the injured paw. She changed its herbal bandages. She carried it outside whenever the sun appeared, letting it feel fresh mountain air. Little by little, strength returned. The pup began chasing falling snowflakes across the yard. It stumbled often. Its oversized paws made running difficult. Whenever it fell, it looked almost offended before scrambling back to its feet. Mira laughed more during those weeks than she had in years. "You'll master those legs eventually." The little wolf answered by barking once. The sound was tiny, almost comical. One afternoon, while Mira gathered firewood behind the cottage, the pup suddenly froze. Its ears lifted. Its silver-blue eyes focused toward the forest. The cheerful playfulness vanished. It stood perfectly still, listening. Moments later, 3 enormous grey wolves emerged silently between the pine trees. Their winter coats blended with the shadows. Each carried scars earned through countless seasons. Ashbrook's hunters had spoken of wolves this size. Few had ever seen them. The village dogs immediately began barking. People hurried indoors. Doors slammed shut. Windows closed. Mira remained where she was. Not because she was fearless. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it. But something told her to stay calm. The white pup walked forward. Slowly. Its tiny body looked almost laughably small beside the towering wild wolves. The largest grey wolf lowered its massive head. For one long moment, it simply looked at the little pup. Then, it turned toward Mira. Golden eyes met hers. There was no hunger in them. No anger. Only quiet recognition. The old wolf lowered its head. Not in submission. In respect. The other 2 wolves did the same. A cold breeze stirred through the trees. Without another sound, the wild wolves disappeared back into the forest. The white pup watched them leave before quietly returning to Mira's side. It leaned gently against her leg. She rested a trembling hand on its head. "What are you?" she whispered. The little wolf only blinked. Far away, inside Eldor's royal capital, another pair of eyes studied the same mystery. Alpha King Soellen stood before a massive table carved from dark oak. Maps covered its surface. Forests, mountain passes, ancient wolf territories. Scattered reports lay beside them. His captain entered quickly. "My king." Soellen looked up. "What news?" The captain placed another scroll upon the table. 3 separate villages report impossible changes. The rivers. They're flowing. The wildlife. Returning. And. He hesitated. There are reports of wolves gathering peacefully near Ashbrook. Soellen slowly unrolled the parchment. A simple drawing had been added by one frightened messenger. A small white wolf. His breath caught. Impossible. For 20 years. No one had seen a white wolf. His father had searched until his dying day. Royal hunters had crossed every mountain. Nothing. Now. Multiple witnesses described the same creature. He looked toward the great window overlooking the kingdom. Snow-covered forests stretched beyond the horizon. If even one white wolf still lives. He murmured. Everything we believed may be wrong. The captain waited. What are your orders? Soellen reached for his traveling cloak instead of his crown. No royal banners. No trumpets. No escort large enough to frighten a village. The captain frowned. You'll travel yourself. I need the truth. Not stories. Not rumors. The Alpha King fastened the silver clasp around his cloak. If someone has found the last white wolf. His eyes drifted toward the endless northern forests. I want to know why it trusted them. Miles away, Lord Varek watched from the balcony of Blackthorn Keep. One of his spies knelt before him. The reports are confirmed. The girl still has the pup. And the forests. They continue changing. Varek smiled without warmth. So? It has begun. The spy hesitated. Should we capture the wolf now? No. Varek walked slowly to the edge of the balcony. Below him, hundreds of soldiers trained in silence. Steel flashed beneath the pale winter sun. Some doors cannot be opened by force. He looked toward the distant Frostvale Mountains. The wolf must lead us. And the girl? His grey eyes narrowed. Watch her. Protect her if necessary. The spy blinked in surprise. My lord. If she dies too soon. Varek said quietly. She becomes useless. Snow drifted across the stone courtyard below. Far beyond the fortress. The little white wolf suddenly lifted its head outside Mira's cottage. Its ears twitched. Without warning, it began walking toward the forest. Not wandering. Not exploring. Purposefully. After several steps, it stopped and looked back at Mira. Then it continued deeper between the ancient pines. Mira hesitated only a moment before following. She could not know that every careful step carried her toward a place forgotten by history, or that hidden among the silent trees, unseen eyes had already begun following them both. The white wolf pup did not run. It moved with quiet certainty, weaving through towering pines whose branches bowed beneath fresh snow. Tiny paw prints appeared one after another across the untouched forest floor, each step steady despite the healing leg that had only days before struggled to carry its weight. Mira followed close behind. She pulled her wool cloak tighter as the cold mountain wind slipped between the trees. Her woven basket bounced gently against her side, filled with bread, dried herbs, a water skin, and fresh bandages. She had intended only to gather firewood that morning. Now she was following a creature that seemed to know exactly where it was going. Slow down, little one, she called softly. The pup stopped. It glanced over its shoulder. Its bright silver-blue eyes met hers for only a heartbeat before it continued deeper into the woods. It was almost as though it wanted to be certain she was still following. The farther they traveled, the quieter the forest became. Birdsong slowly disappeared. Even the wind seemed gentler beneath the ancient pines. Mira noticed trees she had never seen before, despite spending nearly her entire life wandering these woods. Their trunks were broader than cottages, their bark covered with pale green moss that glowed faintly where sunlight touched it. Snow rested undisturbed upon every branch. No hunter's footprints crossed the narrow trails. No axe marks scarred the ancient wood. The forest felt untouched. Forgotten. As though time itself had chosen to walk around this place instead of through it. The white pup suddenly paused beside an enormous stone covered with ivy. It sniffed the air, then slipped behind it. Mira followed. Her breath caught. Beyond the stone lay a narrow path hidden beneath thick blankets of snow. Ancient pillars lined both sides, many broken, others leaning beneath centuries of vines. Someone had built this road. Long ago. Yet no map in Ashbrook had ever mentioned it. She brushed snow from one weathered pillar. Beneath the ice appeared the faded carving of a wolf. Not grey. Not black. White. Its head was raised proudly toward a crescent moon. What is this place? She whispered. The only answer came from the little wolf, who continued walking without hesitation. Far behind them, hidden among thick evergreens, Another group moved just as quietly. Alpha King Sorellen lowered himself from his horse. He crouched beside the fresh footprints crossing the snow. His captain knelt beside him. The reports were true. Sorellen touched one of the tiny paw prints. His fingers lingered there for a moment. So they were. He had spent years searching abandoned dens, forgotten valleys, and mountain caves where legends claimed the white wolves once lived. Every search had ended the same way. Empty. Silent. Too late. Yet here. Fresh tracks crossed the snow only moments old. He looked farther ahead. Smaller footprints walked beside them. A young woman's. She's leading it. The captain asked. Sorellen slowly shook his head. No. His grey eyes followed the trail disappearing between the trees. I think the wolf is leading her. Without another word, the king motioned for his men to leave their horses behind. The forest ahead deserved silence. High above the valley, hidden within jagged cliffs overlooking the ancient road, Lord Varric watched through a polished bronze spyglass. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Excellent. One of his commanders stood nearby. My lord, should we surround them now? Varric lowered the spyglass. If I wanted the wolf. He smiled calmly. It would already belong to me. The commander frowned. Then why wait? Because neither the girl nor the wolf knows where they're truly going. His eyes drifted toward the distant mountains. But something older does. He folded the spyglass carefully. The sanctuary cannot be found. It must reveal itself. And today, I believe it finally will. The hidden road climbed steadily through the forest. Hours passed. Sunlight filtered between towering branches in long golden beams that shimmered across the snow. The white pup never hesitated. It walked as though following a memory older than itself. Mira, meanwhile, began noticing strange things. The air felt warmer. Tiny flowers pushed through patches of melting snow. Crystal water trickled beneath sheets of ice that should have remained frozen until spring. She knelt beside one narrow stream. The water reflected the trees. Then something else. For just a heartbeat, a full-grown white wolf stood behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Only silent forest. When she looked back at the stream, the reflection had vanished. A breeze stirred gently through the pines. Not frightening. Comforting. Almost welcoming. By afternoon the hidden road ended. Ahead stood the remains of an enormous stone gateway half buried beneath roots and moss. Massive wolf statues guarded each side. Time had worn away many details. Even so, their faces carried remarkable dignity. The white pup hurried forward. Its tiny nose brushed gently against the nearest statue. The instant it touched the stone, a deep rumble echoed beneath the ground. Mira stepped backward. Snow slipped from nearby branches. Ancient dust drifted from cracked pillars. Slowly, the gateway began to move. Stone scraped against stone with a sound that had not echoed through the valley for generations. A narrow passage opened beyond it. Cold air flowed outward carrying the scent of fresh water, wildflowers, and ancient cedar. Mira stared in astonishment. This place. The words barely left her lips. Was hidden. The pup barked once, then disappeared through the opening. She hurried after it. The passage led into a valley unlike anything she had ever imagined. Winter seemed unable to enter. Green grass covered the earth. Crystal streams wound peacefully between flowering trees. Butterflies drifted lazily through warm sunlight. Birds filled the air with cheerful songs. It felt less like a hidden valley, and more like a forgotten dream. At its center stood the ruins of an ancient sanctuary. White stone pillars reached toward the sky. Vines wrapped gently around broken walls. Moss softened every staircase. Although abandoned, the place still carried quiet beauty. The little wolf climbed the worn steps without fear. Mira followed slowly. Every heartbeat echoed louder than the last. She felt as though unseen eyes watched kindly from every corner. Not threatening. Protective. Inside the sanctuary rested a circular chamber open to the sky. At its center stood a single stone pedestal. Upon it lay a weathered crystal unlike any jewel Mira had ever seen. It glowed softly beneath the afternoon light. Surrounding the pedestal stretched dozens of carved images. Men, women, kings, children, and beside every one of them, white wolves. Not as servants, not as pets, as equals. Mira slowly walked around the chamber. Her fingertips brushed one ancient carving after another. One showed a young woman placing food before a wounded wolf. Another depicted wolves standing between frightened villagers and a raging fire. Another showed a king kneeling while a white wolf rested its head against his shoulder. She frowned. These aren't stories about rulers commanding wolves. Her voice echoed softly. They're stories about protecting each other. The realization settled quietly inside her heart. Everything the kingdom believed had been wrong. A shadow appeared across the entrance. Mira turned quickly. Alpha King Sorellen stood there. Snow dusted his dark traveling cloak. No crown rested upon his head. No royal jewels decorated his clothing. Only a simple silver wolf clasp fastened his cloak at the shoulder. Behind him waited 4 trusted guards. None had drawn their weapons. For a long moment, neither spoke. The white pup looked from Mira to the stranger. Then, to everyone's surprise, it walked calmly toward the king. Sorellen slowly knelt. He did not reach out. He simply waited. The tiny wolf stopped a few feet away. Its ears twitched. Then, it turned. Without another glance, it walked back to Mira and gently leaned against her leg. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. One of the guards quietly whispered, "It chose her." Sorellen's expression softened. He looked toward Mira with honest curiosity rather than authority. "So," he said quietly, "the legends were true after all." Before Mira could answer, a sharp whistle sliced through the peaceful valley. Then another. Sorellen's eyes narrowed instantly. His captain drew his sword. Figures emerged silently between the trees surrounding the sanctuary. 1, 5, 10, then dozens. Men dressed in dark cloaks moved into position with practiced precision, bows already raised. They had not stumbled upon the valley. They had been waiting for it. Far beyond the ancient gateway, hidden beneath the shadows of towering pines, Lord Varric guided his black horse forward at a slow, confident pace. He gazed toward the sanctuary with quiet satisfaction. At last, the forgotten door had opened. And now, with the last white wolf trapped inside, the greatest hunt in Eldor's history was about to begin. For one breathless moment, the hidden valley forgot how to move. The birds fell silent. The breeze that had carried the scent of wildflowers only moments earlier seemed to disappear into the towering cliffs. Even the crystal stream winding through the sanctuary slowed into an eerie whisper. The peaceful place that had remained untouched for generations suddenly felt surrounded. Alpha King Sorellen stepped in front of Mira without taking his eyes off the tree line. His hand rested calmly upon the hilt of his sword. Not drawn. Ready. His 4 guards spread quietly across the ancient courtyard, each positioning themselves between the sanctuary and the unseen archers hidden among the pines. Snow drifted lazily from the branches overhead. It was the only thing still moving. Then, a slow clap echoed through the valley. 1, 2, 3. The sound bounced from stone walls before fading into silence. A rider emerged from the forest. His black horse walked with steady confidence across the old stone road leading into the sanctuary. Dark armor reflected the pale winter light. A heavy fur cloak flowed behind him like a shadow. His face carried no anger, only calm certainty. Lord Varric, the Alpha King's oldest enemy. He guided his horse to the edge of the sanctuary steps before dismounting with effortless grace. His boots touched the ancient stone as though he had every right to stand there. His grey eyes drifted first toward the white wolf pup, then toward Mira. Finally, toward Sorellen. "So," Varric said, his voice smooth enough to hide every dangerous thought beneath it. "The stories survived after all." Sorellen's gaze never wavered. "You've been following us." "I've been following history." A faint smile crossed Varric's face. "There is a difference." The white wolf pup pressed itself against Mira's leg. Its ears flattened. A quiet growl escaped its tiny chest. The sound was small. Yet every wolf carved into the surrounding walls somehow made it seem much larger. Varric noticed. His smile deepened. Even now. It remembers. Soellen slowly unsheathed his sword. Steel whispered against leather. You've already seen enough. I don't think so. Varric looked toward the crystal resting upon the stone pedestal. For 20 years I've searched for this sanctuary. You found it because you followed a frightened animal. His expression remained perfectly calm. No, I found it because compassion succeeded where ambition failed. His eyes settled upon Mira. And that is exactly what makes her dangerous. Mira frowned. I've done nothing. Not yet. Varric answered quietly. But you will. The words lingered like cold mist. He slowly raised one hand. Instantly, dozens of hidden archers stepped from the surrounding forest. Bowstrings tightened. Arrowheads glittered between snow-covered branches. Soellen's guards lifted their shields. The peaceful valley transformed into a battlefield without a single arrow being fired. I don't want bloodshed, Varric said. Give me the wolf. No. Soellen's answer came without hesitation. The sanctuary. No. The girl. No. Each refusal became colder than the last. Varric sighed softly. I was hoping wisdom would prevail. He lowered his raised hand. The first arrow flew. It struck a stone pillar beside Soellen, exploding into fragments of white dust. The second arrow followed. Then 20 more. The valley erupted into chaos. Royal guards raised heavy shields while arrows rained from every direction. Stone shattered. Snow burst into the air. The peaceful songs of birds gave way to the harsh ringing of steel. Soellen charged forward. His sword flashed beneath the winter sun, knocking arrows aside before they reached Mira. Stay behind me. He shouted. She gathered the trembling white pup into her arms and hurried toward the shelter of the sanctuary walls. Another volley struck. One guard cried out as an arrow pierced his shoulder. Still he remained standing. The white pup suddenly twisted inside Mira's arms. Its silver-blue eyes fixed upon a narrow crack hidden beneath the sanctuary floor. It barked sharply. Once. Twice. Then leaped from her embrace. Wait. Mira ran after it. The tiny wolf squeezed through the narrow opening between two ancient stones. Without thinking, she followed. The passage beyond was barely wide enough for a single person. Cold air drifted upward from somewhere deep below the mountain. Behind her, the sounds of battle slowly faded. Ahead, the white pup continued moving without hesitation. Its tiny paws echoed softly across smooth stone. The tunnel curved deeper into darkness. Mira lit the small lantern hanging from her belt. Golden light revealed walls covered in faded carvings. Not battles. Not kings. Families. Children. Wolves sleeping beside village fires. Farmers sharing harvests with forest animals. Mothers teaching young pups to trust gentle hands. Every carving told the same story. Strength had never been the foundation of Eldor. Kindness had. The little wolf stopped. It looked back toward Mira. Then touched its nose against another carved wolf. A deep rumble shook the mountain. Hidden gears groaned beneath the ancient floor. The wall slowly slid aside. Warm light poured through the opening. Soellen fought his way toward the sanctuary entrance. His sword met another blade with a shower of sparks. Varric himself now stood before him. The two men circled one another across snow-covered stone. You still protect a kingdom that barely deserves you. Varric swung first. Their blades collided. I protect its future. Soellen answered. Not its mistakes. Steel rang through the valley. Varric smiled. Then perhaps we are not so different. Their swords met again. Neither man gained ground. Around them, soldiers clashed among broken pillars while arrows continued falling from the cliffs above. Yet something unusual began happening. The ground trembled. At first only slightly. Then harder. Every wolf statue surrounding the sanctuary began glowing with soft silver light. The battle slowed. Even Varric stepped backward. "What?" he whispered. Deep beneath the mountain, Mira entered an enormous underground chamber. Her lantern suddenly seemed unnecessary. Hundreds of glowing crystals illuminated the cavern with gentle white light. At its center flowed a magnificent spring. Crystal-clear water poured upward from the earth instead of downward, floating gracefully through the air before falling back into a perfectly round pool. The sight stole her breath. The white pup walked directly toward the glowing water. It sat quietly at its edge, waiting. Mira slowly approached. The surface reflected more than her own face. Images rippled across the water. She saw ancient kings, white wolves running beside them, fields filled with flowers, healthy forests stretching farther than the eye could see. Then, everything changed. The water darkened. Trees withered. Rivers turned black. Men carrying royal banners hunted white wolves across snowy mountains. Pups cried beside fallen mothers. Ancient sanctuaries burned beneath crimson skies. Mira covered her mouth. "No." The images continued. Powerful nobles smiled while forests disappeared. The white wolves had not vanished naturally. They had been hunted. Not because they threatened the kingdom, but because they prevented greedy rulers from taking more than the land could survive. The wolves had guarded balance. Those hungry for endless power had seen balance as their greatest enemy. Tears filled Mira's eyes. So that's why. A gentle breeze stirred across the glowing water. The reflection changed once more. A single sentence appeared in ancient silver letters upon the surface of the spring. "Only the heart that protects without asking shall awaken what was lost." The words faded. The white pup looked up at her. Its bright eyes reflected the glowing spring, almost pleading. Above them, the entire mountain shuddered. Massive cracks spread across the sanctuary floor. Ancient pillars trembled. Varric looked toward the glowing stone beneath his feet. His calm expression disappeared for the first time. "The sanctuary," he whispered. "It's waking." Sorellen followed his gaze. Silver light spread rapidly through every carved wolf surrounding the courtyard. The mountain itself seemed alive. Then, the stone floor beneath the sanctuary slowly divided. A hidden staircase emerged from the earth. Cold mist drifted upward. The white pup's distant howl echoed from somewhere below. Varric's eyes blazed with triumph. "So that's where it's hidden." Without another word, he shoved one of his own soldiers aside and sprinted toward the staircase. Sorellen immediately followed. "Mira!" His voice thundered into the opening. No answer came. Only the echo of tiny paws running somewhere deep beneath the mountain. Far below, unaware that both king and enemy were racing toward her, Mira stood beside the glowing heart spring as the entire cavern began to tremble. From the darkness beyond the chamber came the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. Not one pair. Not two. Many. Someone else had found the hidden sanctuary, and they were closing in. The glowing cavern trembled beneath the mountain. Tiny streams of dust drifted from the ceiling, catching the silver light that rose from the heart spring. The floating water continued its slow, graceful dance through the air, untouched by the shaking earth, as though it belonged to a world far older than stone itself. Mira remained frozen beside the pool. Her fingers rested gently against the white wolf pup's soft back. The little creature stared into the glowing water without blinking. Its ears lifted. Its breathing slowed. It seemed to recognize this place. Not through memory. Through instinct. The mountain groaned again. This time the sound came closer. Heavy footsteps echoed through the stone passage behind her. Someone was coming. The first figure burst into the chamber. Alpha King Sorellen. His dark cloak was torn in several places. Snow still clung to his shoulders, while a thin line of blood traced down one arm where an arrow had cut through his sleeve. His sword remained drawn. The instant he saw Mira standing unharmed beside the spring, relief softened his face. "You found it." Mira nodded silently. Her eyes drifted back toward the glowing water. "I don't think," she whispered, "it was ever meant to be hidden forever." Soellen slowly approached the heart spring. Even he seemed smaller before its quiet beauty. Crystal water rose from the earth like living light, filling the cavern with a peaceful glow that warmed the cold stone walls. He had ruled the kingdom for years. Yet he had never imagined something so magnificent lay sleeping beneath his own mountains. Then his eyes found the carvings surrounding the chamber. Hundreds of them. Kings standing beside white wolves. Children laughing beneath flowering trees. Women offering fresh water to exhausted travelers. No crowns appeared larger than ordinary people. No ruler stood above the wolves. Everyone stood together. Equal. Soellen lowered his sword. So much was forgotten. His voice echoed softly. No. Mira answered. It was hidden. Another rumble shook the mountain. This one stronger than the last. Large cracks spread across the cavern floor. Small stones splashed into the glowing spring. The white wolf pup suddenly stood. Its silver-blue eyes locked upon the center of the floating water. Then, without fear, it walked forward. One tiny paw stepped onto the water's glowing surface. Instead of sinking, the spring held it gently. Ripples of silver light spread across the entire chamber. The pup continued walking, step by careful step, until it reached the exact center of the floating stream. The entire cavern began shining brighter. The crystals surrounding the chamber awakened one after another until every wall glowed like moonlight trapped inside stone. Mira shielded her eyes. What is happening? Before Soellen could answer, a deep voice echoed throughout the sanctuary. Not spoken. Remembered. The last guardian has returned. The words seemed to come from everywhere. Stone. Water. Light. The mountain itself. The bond awaits its keeper. The glowing water began circling the little wolf. Not violently. Gently. Like an old friend welcoming someone home. Then, images appeared inside the floating light. White wolves running across endless forests. Children planting young trees. Kings placing their swords upon the ground before entering sacred groves. The kingdom had once lived differently. Power had served life, not ruled over it. Suddenly, a violent crash shattered the peaceful vision. The entrance exploded inward. Broken stone scattered across the chamber. Smoke rolled through the tunnel. Lord Varric stepped inside. His black armor was covered in dust. Several of his mercenaries followed behind him carrying torches and drawn swords. The moment Varric saw the glowing spring, his eyes widened with triumph. So, he whispered, it truly exists. He slowly walked forward. The silver light reflected across his face, yet it failed to soften the hunger burning inside his eyes. For 20 years. He smiled quietly. I searched every mountain. Every ruined temple. Every forgotten valley. And all along. He looked toward the little wolf. The final key was still alive. Soellen stepped between Varric and the spring. It ends here. Varric laughed. No. It begins. His soldiers rushed forward. Steel rang against steel. Soellen met the first attacker before the man reached the spring, knocking him backward across the stone floor. Another charged. The king's sword flashed again. The chamber erupted into battle. Echoes crashed against the glowing walls. The heart spring continued shining. Unafraid. Unmoved. Mira pulled the white pup behind her as another mercenary broke through the fighting. He reached toward the little wolf. She stepped directly into his path. You'll have to go through me. The man hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. Then raised his sword. Before it could fall, Fenrir's howl echoed through the tunnel. Not the howl of the old wolf from another story, but the deep cry of unseen wolves carried through the mountain itself. The mercenary froze. From every passage surrounding the chamber came answering voices. Dozens. Hundreds. Not living wolves. Ancient spirits. Silver shapes emerged from the glowing walls. White wolves made entirely of shimmering light walked silently into the chamber. Their paws left no footprints. Their eyes burned like stars. Every soldier stumbled backward. Some dropped their weapons entirely. The spirits did not attack. They simply stood, watching, judging. Varric alone showed no fear. Their only memories. He reached beneath his cloak. From within he removed a heavy black hammer carved with strange crimson markings. "I don't need your permission." With a furious cry he swung the weapon into one of the crystal pillars surrounding the spring. The impact exploded through the chamber. Crystal shattered. Silver light flickered violently. A deafening roar echoed beneath the mountain. The floating water lost its graceful shape. Dark cracks spread across its glowing surface. The entire sanctuary shook. Massive stones began falling from the ceiling. One crashed beside Mira, sending fragments across the floor. Another crushed a crystal column into glittering dust. Soellen stared upward. The mountain. It's collapsing. The spirit wolves lifted their heads together. Their mournful howl rolled through every tunnel. The heart spring dimmed. The white pup cried out. For the first time since Mira had rescued it beneath the fallen pine. Its frightened voice echoed with real panic. The little wolf slipped. The floating water beneath its paws shattered into countless streams of light. Without thinking, Mira ran. She ignored the falling stones. Ignored the battle. Ignored every warning shouted behind her. One enormous slab of rock broke loose above the spring. It plunged directly toward the tiny wolf. "Mira!" Soellen's voice thundered across the chamber. She never looked back. Throwing herself forward, she wrapped both arms around the pup. The stone struck only a heartbeat later. A blinding flash of silver light exploded through the cavern. The impact threw Soellen across the floor. Varric staggered backward. Every torch went dark. Silence swallowed the mountain. For one endless moment. No one could see. Then, a warm glow slowly spread through the darkness. It came from Mira. She remained curled protectively around the little wolf. The massive stone that should have crushed them had stopped only inches above her back. Hundreds of glowing streams of water held it suspended in the air. The heart spring had awakened. Not because of a king. Not because of ancient blood. But because an ordinary girl had chosen another life before her own. The silver spirits bowed their heads. The little white wolf stepped gently from Mira's arms and placed one tiny paw against her hand. The entire chamber burst into radiant light. Outside the mountain, the frozen forests of Eldor stirred. Snow began melting along forgotten streams. Withered trees unfolded fresh green leaves despite the lingering winter. Wildflowers pushed through frozen earth. Birds filled the sky. Life itself was returning. But inside the sanctuary, Lord Varric refused to surrender. His face twisted with desperate rage. "If I cannot control this power." He lifted the black hammer one final time. "Then no one will." With every ounce of strength he possessed, he hurled the cursed weapon toward the glowing heart of the spring. The hammer flew through the silver light. And the fate of the entire kingdom hung upon the next heartbeat. The black hammer spun through the air like a falling shadow. Its crimson markings glowed brighter with every turn, filling the sanctuary with a sickly red light that fought against the silver radiance of the heart spring. Time itself seemed to slow. No one breathed. No one moved. The little white wolf stood before Mira, its tiny body trembling, yet it did not run. Instead, it lifted its head toward the glowing spring as though trusting something far greater than fear. The hammer came closer. Closer. Then, just before it could strike the heart of the ancient waters, the floating streams of silver light rose together. Not violently. Gracefully. They circled the weapon like ribbons carried by a gentle wind. The hammer stopped in mid-air. It quivered once. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber. Then another. Tiny fractures spread across the black metal until brilliant silver light burst through every crack. With a thunderous sound that shook the mountain, the cursed weapon shattered into thousands of glittering fragments. The pieces dissolved before they ever touched the ground. The darkness they carried vanished with them. Lord Varric stared in disbelief. His hands remained frozen where they had released the hammer. "No." The word escaped his lips as little more than a breath. "No." He took another step toward the spring. "It belongs to me." His voice grew louder. "I searched for it. I sacrificed everything. I earned this power. The silver light answered with silence. The heart spring recognized no greed. It listened only to the heart. Varek's breathing became uneven. Years of careful planning, secret alliances, hidden murders, and endless searching crumbled before his eyes. Everything he had built rested upon one belief. That power belonged to whoever could seize it. The sanctuary had just proven him wrong. Mira slowly stood. Her knees trembled beneath her, yet she never loosened her gentle hold on the little white wolf. The pup looked up at her. Its frightened breathing had begun to calm. It pressed its tiny nose against her hand exactly as it had on the morning it first opened its eyes beside her fireplace. A faint smile touched Mira's face. "We're still here." The little wolf answered with a soft whine. Around them, the spirit wolves lifted their heads. One by one, they began walking toward the heart spring. As each luminous guardian reached the glowing waters, its body dissolved into countless silver lights that flowed gently into the spring itself. The first disappeared. Then another. Then dozens more. Their duty was complete. They had protected the sanctuary until someone worthy had returned. Now, they were finally going home. The mountain continued trembling. Large cracks raced across the ceiling. Soellen looked upward. "We have to leave." His soldiers quickly gathered the wounded while helping one another toward the tunnel entrance. Several of Varek's mercenaries threw down their weapons. Others simply stood in stunned silence, watching the impossible unfold. Only Varek refused to move. His eyes burned with desperate anger. "If I lose this," he whispered, "then the kingdom loses everything." He reached for the broken remains of a fallen crystal pillar. With a roar filled more with desperation than strength, he lifted the jagged stone above his head and charged toward the spring. Soellen stepped directly into his path. Steel flashed. The king's sword met the crystal with a deafening crack. The pillar shattered into glittering pieces. Varek stumbled backward. Before he could recover, the floor beneath him gave way. A section of ancient stone collapsed. He fell hard against the broken steps leading toward the spring. The impact sent his sword skidding across the cavern. He struggled to rise. His hand reached desperately toward the weapon. Then, a massive stone pillar, weakened by the battle, broke free from the ceiling. It crashed between him and the sanctuary entrance. Dust exploded through the chamber. When it settled, Varek found himself trapped. Not crushed. Not wounded beyond saving. Simply surrounded by fallen stone. He looked toward Soellen. For the first time, fear replaced pride. "Help me." His voice trembled. "You cannot leave me here." Soellen stood silently. Years of betrayal stood between them. Wars. Lies. Countless innocent lives. Mira looked toward the trapped man. Even after everything, compassion remained stronger than hatred. "We can't leave him." One of the guards stared at her. "He tried to kill you." She nodded quietly. "I know." "Then why?" She looked toward the glowing spring. "Because if kindness ends today, then nothing we saved truly survives." Soellen lowered his sword. Together, the king and his soldiers pushed aside the fallen stones. It took every ounce of their strength. Slowly, a narrow path opened. Varek crawled free. He looked from Mira to Soellen, unable to understand why they had spared him. No one answered his silent question. Some lessons could never be spoken. They had to be lived. The moment the last person left the sanctuary, the mountain released one final roar. The ancient chamber disappeared beneath a cascade of stone. Dust rolled across the valley like morning fog. The sanctuary had completed its purpose. Its secrets no longer needed hiding. Outside, the miracle spread across Eldor. The change began at the mountain's peak. Silver water burst from hidden springs that had remained dry for generations. It flowed down rocky slopes, carrying life wherever it passed. Frozen rivers broke free from their icy prisons. The dark stains that had poisoned streams for decades simply disappeared. Ancient pines lifted their heavy branches as fresh green needles covered them once more. Wildflowers pushed through melting snow. Golden fields awakened though spring had barely begun. High above the forests, great flocks of birds circled joyfully beneath clear blue skies. Animals stepped from hiding without fear. Foxes, deer, elk, even great grey wolves appeared upon distant hills, watching the valley with quiet approval. Throughout the kingdom, people paused in their daily work. Farmers lowered their tools. Children stopped playing. Old men removed their hats. Everyone felt it. The land had taken a deep breath. And finally, it could breathe again. News spread faster than any rider. The Alpha King had found the lost sanctuary. The last white wolf still lived. The forests were healing. Within days, nobles, village elders, historians, and witnesses gathered inside the great hall of Eldor. The chamber overflowed with people. Many expected another war. Instead, they were given the truth. Ancient carvings recovered from the sanctuary stood beside weathered scrolls found within hidden archives beneath the royal library. The oldest historians carefully unrolled each fragile document. Together they revealed a history erased long before anyone living had been born. The white wolves had never threatened the kingdom. They had protected it. The earliest kings had ruled beside them, not over them. Generations ago, powerful nobles hungry for greater wealth had feared the wolves because they defended forests, rivers, and sacred lands from reckless greed. Those nobles had hunted the guardians nearly to extinction. They had destroyed records, burned temples, silenced anyone who remembered. Among those names, one family appeared again and again. House Varek. The silence inside the hall became almost unbearable. Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen generation. It all stood exposed beneath the light of undeniable truth. Lord Varek lowered his head. Not in humility, in defeat. His own surviving officers stepped away from him. One by one. None wished to stand beside a man whose ambition had nearly destroyed the kingdom itself. By order of the royal council, Varek lost his title, his lands, his command, and every privilege his family had claimed for generations. He was taken away not by cheering crowds or angry mobs, but by silent guards. Justice did not need celebration. Truth had already won. The weeks that followed transformed Eldor. The old laws condemning sacred forests to endless harvesting were abolished. Ancient sanctuaries were protected once more. Children learned the true history of the White Guardians instead of the stories built upon fear. Travelers began planting young trees beside the roads as a tradition of gratitude. Hunters took only what they needed. Villages celebrated the first day of spring by leaving bowls of fresh water and bread at the edge of the forest, not as offerings, but as symbols of respect for the creatures that shared their home. Alpha King Sorellen traveled across the kingdom without royal ceremony. He listened more than he spoke. He rebuilt trust one village at a time. People noticed. The crown no longer stood above the land. It stood beside it. As for Mira, very little about her changed. She still preferred simple clothes. She still woke before sunrise. She still wandered the forests with her woven basket, gathering herbs and helping injured animals whenever she found them. Only now, she was never alone. The little white wolf followed everywhere. Its legs had grown stronger. Its paws no longer stumbled through the snow. Its once fragile body had become graceful and swift. Children laughed whenever it raced through wildflowers. The elders smiled whenever it rested beside Mira during village gatherings. No one feared it. They understood. Hope had 4 paws and a coat as white as fresh snow. Seasons passed. Spring became summer. Summer gave way to golden autumn. One peaceful evening, Mira climbed a gentle hill overlooking Ashbrook. The valley below glowed beneath the setting sun. Fields shimmered with healthy grain. Smoke rose peacefully from cottage chimneys. Laughter drifted across the breeze. Beside her sat the white wolf. No longer a frightened pup. It had grown into a magnificent young guardian. Its snowy coat reflected the evening light until it seemed woven from the clouds themselves. Sorellen soon joined them, leaving his horse farther down the path. He stood quietly beside Mira. Neither hurried to speak. Sometimes silence carried more meaning than words. Far below, a group of children ran across the meadow. The young white wolf watched them with calm golden eyes before slowly rising to its feet. From the distant forest came answering howls. Not cries of loneliness. Calls of family. Grey wolves emerged between the pines. Then another white wolf. Smaller. Then another. Mira blinked. They survived. She whispered. Soellen smiled. No. They returned. The healing of the heart spring had done more than restore the land. It had called the scattered descendants of the white guardians home. The bloodline was no longer alone. The young white wolf looked once at Mira. Then toward the waiting pack. It walked several steps. Stopped. Looked back again. Mira smiled through tears. You don't have to choose. The wolf trotted back to her. It gently rested its head beneath her hand for a long, quiet moment. Then it turned once more and ran toward the forest. The waiting wolves greeted it with joyful movements before disappearing together beneath towering pines glowing in the last light of day. Mira watched until the final white tail vanished among the trees. She felt no sadness. Only peace. She had never saved the last white wolf. She had simply given hope enough time to find its way home. Above the Kingdom of Eldor, the first evening stars appeared one by one. A proud white wolf lifted its head toward the moon. Its clear, powerful howl rolled across rivers, forests, mountains, and villages, carrying a promise that every heart in the kingdom seemed to understand. Some legacies are protected by crowns. Others are protected by swords. But the greatest ones survive because one ordinary soul chooses kindness when no one is watching. And sometimes, that single act of compassion is enough to heal an entire world.